Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Mr. Sitter podcast featuring Anthony Locascio. That's me. Hey, going? I hope you enjoyed the last week's worth of football action, of which there wasn't a great deal to kind of remark upon because it was FA Cup, and as I've expressed a few times on this podcast, FA Cup is boring. But we are going to talk about it a little bit. We're going to talk about some stuff in Serie A. We're going to talk about the transfers, because the transfer window is coming to an abrupt end. In fact, by the time this episode is released, it will have shut. So we're going to chat about all of the hottest deadline day and deadline day adjacent deals and some fun stuff that's happening there. We're going to have our lasagna, and we are going to have our sitter of the week, and I'm going to chat about this weekend's big games, which I did not do last week because I forgot. So, without any further ado, let me just plug my my pseudo sponsor, which is False 9 Threads. That's these guys. This is Andrea Pirlo taking a free kick for Italy. It is streetwear that captures iconic football moments. It's cool as shit, and it's like the best thing that you can wear out in public if you want to show that you're a football fan and you don't want to commit the fashion faux pas that is wearing a fucking Arsenal jersey that like accumulate, because you know how the football jerseys are designed to like be sweat absorbent. They accumulate BO more than any other jersey. So if you don't want to be that guy that stinks at the pub, get yourself some fucking False 9 Threads, man. That's the bottom line, because Low Cash said so. Some fun transfers is not the name of a Korean man. It is the name of the opening to this podcast. Moises Caicedo, one of my favorite players in the Premier League at the moment, took to Instagram to basically kind of like preemptively apologize to the Brighton fans for accepting a record bid. Well, not apologize, but just justify it to them for accepting a record bid for them. For Brighton, that is, to move to Arsenal. Arsenal are very interested, but negotiations broke down. Arsenal decided to sign Jorginho instead, which we'll chat about in just a second. So Caicedo stays with Brighton at least for the next 6 months. He'll probably leave after that, unless, of course, Brighton make the Champions League, which I fucking hope they do, and I can see every possibility that they do it. We're going to talk about Brighton a little bit later, because I'm going to explain exactly why I, as a 30-year-old football fan, am picking a new team. Yeah, man. Yeah. I know that that's blasphemy. I know that it's sacrilege. Football fans and sport fans generally, you know, we pick a team when we're like 7 for no fucking reason, and we let them break our heart and give us anxiety for the rest of our lives. And yes, I very much am talking about Juventus when I say that, and I'm not going to ever abandon Juventus, of course, but I need to pick an auxiliary team, and it's going to be Brighton, and I'll tell you why a little bit later. So Caicedo stays with Brighton, which I'm very happy about. Instead, Arsenal signed Jorginho from Chelsea in the final 6 months of his contract. Arsenal, they love to rock up at a Chelsea garage sale, don't they? They've signed a few scrap heap players in the past from Chelsea. In fact, there's been a lot of players that have moved from like in between Chelsea and Arsenal. It seems like the at the end of their career, spent forces always go to Arsenal, like your Willian, your David Luiz, your Peter Cech, and the opposite occurs for Arsenal. Like the better players start at Arsenal, end up at Chelsea. I'm talking about Ashley Cole, I'm talking about Olivier Giroud, I'm talking about Cesc Fabregas, even though there's obviously the middle ground of Barcelona there. So interesting, but in this case, I think it's a better move for Jorginho, because they really needed a player like that. They've got Elneny injured. Jorginho is not the same kind of player as Elneny, but he's a major upgrade in midfield. They needed somebody else in those deep midfield positions, and Jorginho could very well end up with a Premier League winners medal, which is one that he does not have. He never won that with Chelsea. So he'll go back to Italy or Brazil or wherever he'll live, being the hybrid, with a Premier League winners medal and a Champions League winners medal from his time in England, fully justifying his decision to leave the peninsula to come to England, assuming Arsenal win the Premier League, of course. Chelsea Of course, needed to make a bit of room. They've sold Hakim Ziyech to PSG, which I kind of think is a low-key, really, really good move for Hakim Ziyech. And they signed Enzo Fernandez for £105 million, which is a Premier League record. That is the most expensive player in the history of the Premier League. This is a combination of the fact that Enzo Fernandez is the young player of the entire World Cup. He has only been in Europe for 6 months, but he's already been killing it with Benfica. Benfica always way overcharged. Like all Portuguese clubs, way overcharged for their players. And Chelsea are just like, hot ticket, let's get it. That's what they've been doing. They got Mudryk, they got João Felix. They just sign in the hot. I mean, they've spent more in these last two transfer windows than Liverpool, for example, spent in the last 10 years. So they're just going for it, Chelsea, which is a big reason why I've abandoned them. Even though they're signing all of these hot prospect players, I absolutely love Enzo Fernandez. I really like João Felix. I really like Benoit Badiashile. And I did like Mykhailo Mudryk, I must admit. Until recent reports that the FA have opened an investigation into a video on TikTok where Mudryk reportedly used the N-word and will from like last year, in which they will decide whether or not to punish him. He's already got a big neck tattoo that says "Praise Jesus" or something, so the guy's a little bit cooked. Let's just say he's a phenomenal player, but if this is the case, it's going to be a bit hard to like him. Another player who's a bit hard to like he seems like a petulant sort of player. Juve were very keen to dispense with him after having a really good season in his one season there. I'm talking about João Cancelo, who moves on loan with option to buy to Bayern Munich from Manchester City, seemingly out of nowhere. Now, apparently, reports have come out that state his departure is due to a lack of game time. He was upset that he didn't start in the FA Cup against Arsenal, and pretty much Pep said to him, hey, if you don't like it, you can fuck off. And Cancelo said, well, I'm going to fuck off because there's interest in Bayern Munich, one of the biggest teams in the world. I hope it works out for him. He's a really good player. He's not a really good defender, but we'll see how, if Bayern decide to play wing backs and have Alphonso Davies and him on right and left, that's pretty potent, man. So we'll see what Nagelsmann can do with him. Man City obviously felt that they could dispense with him. Interesting move, but we'll see what happens. Anthony Gordon, the most British-looking person I've ever seen in my life, moves from Everton to Newcastle for an undisclosed fee, although it is reported that it might be something like £40 million, which is crazy because he's just okay, but he moves to Newcastle in one of these big Newcastle moves that we're going to have to get used to seeing, and Everton are not happy about it. Everton released a very point-blank statement on Instagram saying that the 21-year-old forward leaves Everton after submitting a formal transfer request. Gordon joined the club's academy at the age of 11 and made his senior debut as a 16-year-old in the Europa League tie in December 2017. He went on to make 78 first-team appearances, scoring 7 goals. Everton having sacked Frank Lampard and appointed Sean Dyche recently. Sean Dyche is the modern-day Sam Allardyce. He's basically the, we're going to survive manager. I still don't think that they will survive because things aren't going well there, but I think Sean Dyche is an infinitely better manager than Frank Lampard, so we will see. But not a good couple of weeks for Everton, who were about to sign Ana Danjuma from Villarreal. Very pacey attacking player. Dutch. Played pretty well against Juve last year, so I hate him. But he was basically signed for Everton before Tottenham swooped in and just kind of stole him. So not a good couple of weeks for Everton. What looked like to be not a good couple of weeks for Barcelona. They tried to re-register Gavi on a new contract. Gavi was in his final 6 months. They tried to re-register him so that they could obviously sign him for years and years and years. And they also wanted to give him the number 6 so that him and Pedri could be the new number 6, number 8, the way Andres Iniesta and Xavi were, but Barcelona were unable to generate enough savings ahead of next season despite trying and not complying with at least 2 articles of La Liga's regulations on the matter of registering the player. This was a big drama last week, but in the last couple of days they have finally been able to register him, so he is now wearing his number 6, and Barcelona don't have to fear losing him on a free in the next transfer window. Good, because that would have been a fucking farce. Speaking of a fucking farce, Inter Milan are going to lose their I don't know if he's actually the club captain, but he's like he wears the captain's armband. No, it must be Handanovic. He's at least the second captain. Milan Skriniar, we're talking about one of the best defenders in Serie A in the last 5 or 6 years. He will move on a free to PSG. Big drama. There was speculation that he might move now. He's not going to move now. He will move to PSG in the summer, effectively like pushing through the move and basically tarnishing his reputation, or at least throwing it into question at the club. I'm happy when Inter are suffering, so fantastic. They're definitely going to have to sell one of their bigger players. I don't think it's going to be Lautaro. I think Brozovic, getting his salary off, or maybe selling Denzel Dumfries, is going to be their move in the summer as well, because they're in financial trouble, as they always are. Their replacement option for Skriniar, I mean, they were thinking about getting a stopgap option now if he did leave now, but he is leaving in the summer. And a name that has been tossed up is Manchester United's Harry Maguire, which, I mean, mainstream Premier League fans will be like, oh, look at a fucking Maguire. Harry Maguire is not a bad player, guys. You all know it, if you're not fucking idiots. And as we've seen with Chris Smalling, a English defender coming to Serie A is it's a pretty good move for him. So I'd actually be worried if Inter signed Harry Maguire. I think Harry Maguire would be really good for them, given that they are very good off set pieces as well, and his big, thick cement block of a head is very useful for that. So interesting thing to keep an eye on. Staying with Manchester United, they signed Marcel Sabitzer from Bayern Munich, who, even though he hasn't really been a hit for Bayern Munich, he was excellent for Leipzig, a leader for the Austrian national team, a very versatile midfielder. I think he's a great signing for Manchester United. And he's only 28 years old, so I really like that signing. A signing that I would really not like is one that didn't thankfully go down in the dying hours of the transfer window, and that is Nicola Zaniolo to Bournemouth. Yeah, so Bournemouth submitted a bid that met the valuation of Roma for Nicola Zaniolo, who's openly said that he wants to leave Roma. This would have been music to my ears in the summer transfer window, because he was a major target for Juve and a player that I think potential-wise is possibly Italy's best player at the moment in terms of potential. He's a bit of a fuckhead. He's young. He's copped a couple of ACL injuries. And he is a player that is deserving of a status way above Bournemouth. No offense to Bournemouth, but he has the potential to be an elite player. But I guess that's just kind of a statement of how the Premier League is at the moment. Teams of the bottom end could afford teams at the top end players from other leagues. But the situation is cooked. So last night, Zaniolo changed his mind. He had rejected a move to Bournemouth, which was the only bid that Roma accepted because it was the only bid that met their valuation. He changed his mind and wanted to accept Bournemouth's deal because Mourinho basically said, you're going to stay and you're never going to play. You're going to be frozen out of the team and you can fuck off in 6 months if you want. So he decided to accept Bournemouth's offer, but Bournemouth had to reject the request because they'd already spent too much money on other players, having signed Sassuolo's Hamid Traore, who is fucking awesome. Just for the record, guys, the Premier League's about to discover a really good new player from Sassuolo. 30 million euros for Traore, Ivory Coast international, very good player. Has been incorrectly stated to be Diallo, who's on loan at Sunderland, who belongs to Manchester United. They came to Italy together from the Ivory Coast. False documentation proved them to be brothers. They're not brothers, but that's what people say. They're not brothers. So basically, Zaniolo is left in no man's land, which is kind of sad. But let's hope that he works it out and finds somewhere to play that is worthy of his stature, and finds a coach who is able to bring the best out of him, who is able to motivate him, who is able to show him what he really is. And man, it would be amazing if he went to Brighton. My boys! If he went to Brighton and Roberto De Zerbi got to work with him, put him on the opposite wing to Kaoru Mitoma and just watch him fucking fly. Seeing Zaniolo in the Premier League would be amazing, even though he probably would get injured. Let's see what happens there. Very interesting situation to watch. Or he could beg for forgiveness with Mourinho and re-sign with Roma. We'll see. I wanted him at Juve, but Juve are fucking done. We're going to talk about that later. Last little bit of transfer business that I want to discuss is another player that I hoped to see at Brighton, but he makes another really, really big move. We are talking, of course, about Socceroos defender Harry SOUTTAR moving from Stoke City to Leicester City to play in the Premier League. A $26 million plus $8.7 million in add-ons, according to the BBC transfer. That is Australian dollars. I couldn't, from my respectable Googling in Australia, find out what that was in pounds, but let's assume it's like, I don't know, 21 million pounds. That would be my guess as total, not for the transfer fee, which is a record for any Australian player. And I mean, it's funny because he's fucking Scottish, but he's Aussie diaspora, so we love him. I love Harry SOUTTAR. I think he's a magnificent defender, and he may well save Leicester City's season because they're not very good in defense, and he is a very good defender. So watch this space. Let's see what happens. Those are the fun transfers that we chatted about because it was FA Cup weekend. FA Cup weekend is usually boring as fuck for me, but there were a few things that I wanted to talk about. Number one, there was a very kind of made news that there was the circular red cards that were issued in the Wrexham game. I think they were shown. So the yellow card is still normal, traditional kind of rectangular, and then the red card was a circle. Now this has actually happened before in like 2005. They sampled it, and now it's back. And the idea behind it is that referees, when they reach into their pocket, they can by touch differentiate between the yellow and the red card, so they don't have to like accidentally bring one out and there's confusion, blah blah blah, which seems fucking stupid to me because I don't really think pulling both of them out and going, oh, maybe it's longer than this one is like what we're wasting 4 seconds of time, and that's too much for us to be able to handle. Seems fucking stupid. And seeing them issue like it's like you're putting a pub coaster up at the player seems kind of dumb. I don't imagine this is going to last, but that's what we saw tested in the FA Cup on the weekend. Brighton, my boys, knock out Liverpool. Brighton just have Liverpool's number. Brighton are so fucking good. And my fucking 2 people messaged me after this happened because of how much I've spoken about Kaoru Mitoma on this podcast. He scored 2 goal of the season contenders against Liverpool in just the last couple of weeks. This one was just delectable, and I fucking love this guy. Dr. Dribbling, the guy who did his thesis on dribbling, neglected to sign a professional contract as he go to university. There is nothing I don't love about this man, and another reason why Brighton are my boys. They knock out Liverpool. Liverpool are gone. It is not a good season for the pool. Manchester City knock out Arsenal. Arsenal fielded a weakened 11. Manchester City fielded a basically full-strength 11. So there is kind of this school of thought that Arsenal shouldn't really give a fuck that now they're out of the FA Cup, so they have one fewer distractions for the Premier League, and they played a weakened team, so like it's okay. But there is also this idea that there's more pressure to get a result now when the two teams play each other in the Premier League, and that Manchester City have the psychological edge, having already defeated them this season in the first game that they played. Who knows? Who knows what this result yields? I think I personally lean more towards the former camp because, yes, they do have the psychological edge, but Arsenal are not going to win the Premier League by only defeating Man City or avoiding defeat against Man City for the rest of the season. The Premier League is won by defeating all the little teams, and the defeat here with a second-string team to what is basically the best team in the world isn't going to bother them, so I don't think it's going to bother them that much at all. I think this is a great result for Arsenal. No coach wants to lose anything, but this will be good, assuming they end up winning the Premier League, which I still think that they will. Another big result is, of course, Wrexham, who are owned by Ryan Reynolds and his buddy, who are non-league. They play in the National League, which is like the top non-league, and they've invested a lot of money in them, and they have that documentary, Welcome to Wrexham, which you can watch on Amazon, if I'm not mistaken. They drew 3-3 with Sheffield United, who, of course, playing the Championship, and will be playing the Premier League next weekend if the Championship continues to follow the trajectory that it has been this season. Blake Lively, who is, of course, Serena from Gossip Girl, and, of course, Ryan Reynolds' wife, put an Instagram story up that she downloaded whatever the app that they use in America to watch this football, just to watch her husband be anxious for an entire fucking 90 minutes. They were almost victorious. They were winning 3-2. A very, very late equalizer from Sheffield United puts them into a FA Cup replay, and let's just hope they fucking knock them out, because it's an amazing story with a national team league taking on a championship team and doing so well. that's the fun from the FA Cup. Who knows? Let's go. Brighton going to win the FA Cup. I'm saying it now. Brighton are going to knock out Man City and win the FA Cup. Even though they failed to sign Harry SOUTTAR, but they may sign him if Leicester get relegated. Then maybe they'll sign Harry SOUTTAR. I don't know. Maybe all my dreams will come true. Okay. Another funny thing that happened over the weekend was a taxi driver in Turin who has 170 autographs from his beloved Juventus players on his taxi. Tommy Agosta gets autographs from players that he's had in his taxi over the years, including the likes of Michel Platini, Fabio Cannavaro, Carlos Tevez, Cristiano Ronaldo, and Gianluigi Buffon, just to name a few. A prince in Riyadh heard about this and offered 100,000 euros to Tommy for the taxi, but Tommy straight up refused because that's how much he loves Juve. This is my segue into talking about Juventus. Juve lost to Monza, the first time that a newly promoted team has done a new team, a team that's never been in Serie A before, a first time that they've done the double over Juventus since 1920, in which a newly promoted first time in the first division side by the name of Inter Milan did it to Juve. It is the darkest period in Juventus history. Certainly the darkest period of my following of Juve. Things are going to get way, way worse. The UEFA investigation against the Super League clubs has yielded a result that UEFA are not allowed to prosecute them for the Super League shenanigans, which means that the UEFA investigation will probably not lead to major punishments for Juve, but the paying the players under the table will fuck them. They may get a new point penalty in addition to the 15-point penalty. I don't think that 15-point penalty is going to be overturned, and Juve will need to do everything they can to fight off relegation this season. There will be no European football next year. I can pretty much guarantee it, which means that some pretty hefty assets are going to have to be sold off. You hope that Max Allegri leaves because it's going to have to be a youth-based project. Thankfully, Juve's next-gen side, who play in Serie C, have been quite a good farm for players, and maybe we're going to have to base our talent scouting off of that for the next little while. But yeah, have some sympathy, man, because it's fucking hard, all right? Like, I know that football fandom is toxic to the degree where if you don't like what a club represents, you just automatically hate the supporters. That's a thing that idiots believe. I don't hate Inter Milan supporters. I don't hate I don't hate any supporters really, other than cunt supporters that of any team. In fact, possibly the biggest demographic of supporters that I dislike are Juve supporters. Mostly because they're idiots and I don't agree with their opinions on Juve. I just don't like the finger pointing, bashing, just being an asshole on the internet kind of fandom. So having said that, have a bit of sympathy for me, for Juve supporters, because it's this weird bipolar decade cyclical roller coaster that we are on. You know, Juve got relegated in 2006. Off the high of Italy winning the World Cup. I was distraught. Team was in Serie B for a year. All of the big players, bar a few heroes, left. We came back up, a couple of decent seasons, followed by a couple of seasons finishing 7th, which by Juventus standards is a bit of a fucking disaster. Antonio Conte comes in. Andrea Agnelli comes in, who the first part of his tenure was an absolute revolution. We win 9 on the trot, and I almost take it for granted that Juve are going to be the kings of Serie A, but the management eventually turned sour, and you know, it's almost like from the moment they rebranded to the double J symbol, things started to fall apart. They started to make some really questionable decisions. The Cristiano Ronaldo signing seemed to me like this is Juve of the 90s. We signed the best players in the world. Like, we are absolutely back. But the truth is that there was a major, major dark side to that transfer, which was emblematic of the kind of total mismanagement that Juventus had been involved in for the entire time that Fabio Paratici and the rest of them were involved. And now we are seeing the fruits of those very dark labors, and it could be a long, long stretch for us. I hope that it isn't. Genuinely, I hope that it isn't, but I'm not optimistic. So have a bit of sympathy. And in turn, I will eat humble pie and I will praise Napoli because they are going to win Serie A. They won in the dying embers against Roma, who are starting to become a little bit of a decent team. And Victor Osimhen is just like one of the best players in the world right now. Kvaratskhelia, also one of the best players in the world. And their squad is deep. It is talented. Luciano Spalletti's teams usually shit themselves. They are not shitting themselves this season. They're doing well. And that guy, if he can turn it around, if he can turn a career around that has yielded quite little silverware for the revolutionary approach that he's taken to it. Like, he's a maverick, the guy. He's a fucking lunatic. If he can get a trophy to add to his hall of respect, then my hat's off to Luciano Spalletti, who I loved when he was Roma coach. He deserves it. So I apologize. I apologize for doubting them. Even though if they do win, this Scudetto will always be one that was won with the caveat of Juve were nothing this season. Milan have imploded. Inter are just like fine. Atalanta are never going to win the Scudetto ever, so it doesn't matter. And like Roma and Lazio, so they have no real competition this year. But that doesn't mean that they're not playing blistering, amazing football and that they don't deserve it. So hats off to Napoli. It's wrapped up. They're 13 points ahead. Never in the history of Italy's 13. They're 13 points ahead. Never in the history of Italy's 3-point era has a team ever been 13 points ahead of second place. So, kudos. Hats off to them. Congrats. I was wrong. And the worst part about it is not that I don't hate Napoli. I dislike them, but I don't hate them. The worst part is that fucking idiot that I mentioned that was like, you've seen how Napoli are playing. I hate that guy was right because I could see it in his eyes that he's never watched Serie A. So that's upset me. Whatever, doesn't matter. Let's talk about some other funny shit. A guy called Lucas Haraslin, who plays for Sparta Prague, in a friendly over the weekend, wore a GoPro on his head. It's amazing. Go and check it out if you haven't seen the footage. It's like watching a VR professional football game. It's sick. Go and check that out. Real good. Mark Clattenburg, who you might remember as being a Premier League referee a little while ago. I hear Mark Clattenburg talk on podcasts here and there about the art of refereeing. He's pretty fucking spectrumy, and I think maybe you have to be a referee at that top level. Sorry if that's problematic to say, but yeah, he seems a little on the cusp. That guy still doesn't deserve what happened in his tenure in Egypt. He was refereeing in Egypt. He was heavily criticized by Mortada Mansour, who is the president of Zamalek Sporting Club, the 14-time record winners of the Egyptian Premier League. Mansour alleged to have made false accusations over Clattenburg's private life, where he has incorrectly declared that Clattenburg was in a relationship with a man, which has led for threats from Zamalek fans, playing a key role in Clattenburg's decision to leave the Egyptian FA and just go back to England. He's totally been misled. Excuse me. I'm allergic to homophobia. Which is that's how you slander somebody in those kind of countries, which is kind of yucky. But Clattenburg got out of there, even though he wasn't in a relationship with a man. But even if he was, I don't think that's cool, and he'd wanted to stay. The president was concerned with a number of questionable calls that Mark Clattenburg made. Boo fucking who, man. That's the state of the game in certain places. The state of the game in our place is it's Australian football, man. I don't want to get in trouble again. I don't want to get people all hot and bothered, but it's fast after fucking fast. The stuff in the Melbourne Derby, and now, again, one day who plays for Adelaide United gets injured in an A-League game, Adelaide United versus Melbourne City, and he had to wait fucking 35 minutes because there's no ambulance on site. There's ambulances on site in every single, other state, except for Victoria. Apparently, they've deemed that it's not necessary. So this poor guy had a fucking broken leg and just had to sit there. The game was stopped. He just had to sit there waiting for an ambulance to come and get him. Like, it made international news how farcical this was. And should we really be surprised? Is rugby league not a farce? Like rugby league, much like you got AFL, you got cricket, but all these big sports, they're all kind of stupid in Australia because everything's kind of stupid in Australia. And I'm starting to think that maybe that's the reason why Australian football isn't good. I don't know. I want to make a documentary on it. I want to get some funding from fucking SBS or something and make a documentary entitled "Why Australian Football is Shit." Because it's shit, guys. It's not good. And it's not just because the A-League doesn't have relegation, which means the stakes are so much lower for teams doing shit that they can just like sit in the shitness and just like rebrand for next year and we'll try and be better next year. It doesn't matter. It's not because of that. It's not because the FA doesn't pump money into youth development. It's not because parents have to pay thousands of dollars over the span of their like child's lifetime to pay for them to play in elite academies, etc. There's something cultural. There's something going on at a systemic but also kind of a psychological level. Is it the ingrained convict tall poppy syndrome that we just have embedded in our culture? Is that why we don't like to see flair, that we don't like to see, because football, yes, it's a team sport, but it's also a sport where moments define it, because it's not a high scoring game like basketball or even rugby league or AFL. It's a sport of moments, and moments are made by individuals, and individualism is something that is just not appreciated in Australia. Like in America, they home of the free land of the brave, the American dream, the idea of coming to America with nothing and rising above your station and becoming something is entrenched in their values. Here it's totally different. If you want to be something, fuck you, shut up, bro. People, it makes stand-up comedy and podcasting, the things that I do, like the stupidest thing you could choose to do with your life in Australia, but that's my business, not yours. People buy tickets, people pay their money to come and see me perform. Yet I know in the back of everybody's head, somewhere deep in the nether crevices of their consciousnesses, they're all thinking every second that I'm talking, shut up, cunt. And I'm sure you're thinking it right now, because I'm thinking it right now. And maybe that's why Australian football isn't good, but I don't know. Give me some funding, SBS, and I'll make the documentary. Why Australian football is shit. Anyway, let's crack on to our lasagna while I've completely devalued your morality in listening to me. I like this one. This one's fun. Didier Lamkel-Zé is a Cameroonian international who plays in Belgium right now. He played for Royal Antwerp in 2021, fell out of favour with the coach and tried to push through a transfer to my fucking team, Panathinaikos. That's right, I'm a Brighton and Hove and Albion and Panathinaikos supporter. Guys, for the record, stating it for the record. I didn't extrapolate on why I've properly become a Brighton and Hove Albion supporter. You can become a fan of something late in life, no matter what it is. An author, a string of movies, a comic book, and a football club is like Brighton and Hove Albion in their current guise were not around when I was a child. They were not an option. But now, in terms of their scouting networks, the way that they use a statistical approach to sign players, the way that they unearth these gems and sell them for heaps and heaps of money, the way that the machine still clogs along, even though the likes of Bissouma and Cucurella and Trossard and even Graham Potter, who you kind of herald as the architect behind this, leave, they bring in Roberto De Zerbi, who is like my fucking favorite coach, and I wanted him at Juve, and he's not gonna be at Juve for a long time if he ever gets there. But Like, there's just so much to like about them. I like them so much, and I see no reason why I shouldn't become a supporter of them. And you can do that, guys. Don't be afraid of mainstream thinking. Don't be afraid of idiot, toxic football fans. You can do that if you want. If your club, the club that you love, goes to shit, Chelsea, they don't look like they're going to shit, but they have gone to shit. And my rose-tinted goggles with regards to them have been totally tarnished. They are money-grubbing, disgusting, just like trying to buy the world. I hate what they represent. I have hated what they represented for a long time, and I don't love their ethos anymore. I loved it. I loved Didier Drogba. I loved Michael Essien. I loved Michael Ballack. I loved Frank Lampard. I loved the Mourinho. I loved Ricardo Carvalho. I loved what Mourinho did to that club in the 2000s, and I fell in love with them, and I abandoned Liverpool, who my dad had indoctrinated me to support when I was fucking 12, and I became a supporter of them. And now I'm taking a moral stand, and I'm saying that I don't like them anymore, and I'm supporting Brighton and Hove Albion. Take it or fucking leave it. I will never abandon Juve. It's right here. That's my blood, okay? The Premier League is amazing. I've chosen Brighton. Suck my dick. Okay? So, Panathinaikos are my other blood team, and Lam Keltze wanted to move to Panathinaikos, and they weren't letting him, and so on transfer deadline day, he rocked up to Royal Antwerp's training facility wearing an Anderlecht shirt with Yannick Bolasie on the back, who was his mate, and he tried to gain access to their training facility, was stopped by security, obviously, because he was wearing the jersey as clearly a provocative gesture, because Royal Antwerp and Anderlecht are major fucking historical rivals in the Belgium League. And he got into a scuffle with the security guard, and it was like a little bit of a fight, and there was like footage of it. Very, very funny thing that went down. He didn't end up getting his move to Panathinaikos. He ended up staying with Royal Antwerp for 6 months and got sent out on 2 consecutive loans before finally getting sent out to Kortrijk. He plays for Kortrijk now in Belgium. Let me know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, guys, if you're fans of the Jupiter League. Yeah. He apologized on social media. He said, I want to apologize to the club and to the Antwerp supporters because they are magnificent and wonderful supporters, and they always supported me, in a video that was pretty like emotional and grovelly. And so that's your lasagna for the week, the time that a guy wore a rival jersey to push through a transfer. Imagine like Anthony Gordon was like, I want to move to Newcastle, so here's me turning up to Everton wearing a Liverpool jersey, even though I've been with them since 11 years old. It's basically that. I can only imagine the way Everton would have kicked him out of the door had that happened. Anyway, that's your thing for the week. Sitter of the week is Freddie Ljungberg versus Bolton Wanderers in an FA Cup quarter-final match between the two sides in 2005. This is fucking peak Arsene Wenger Arsenal. You watch, like, they ended up winning this game with a Freddie Ljungberg goal, incidentally. The Swedish international scored a goal which was his redemption in this game because his sitter was fucking magnificent. You see the like amazing one-touch movement passing that was just a staple of that Arsene Wenger era, even towards like even the end of his tenure, where people were criticizing him for only ever making he made the Champions League every fucking year, and people were like, well, Arsenal are invincibles, blah 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 blah. And as soon as he left, Arsenal were a laughing stock until basically Arteta came back. And fuck, man, anybody who saw that Arsenal All or Nothing doco that was released before this season, you can tell that something special was happening there. So I'm glad that I was vindicated in knowing about that. But anyway, bang, 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 bang. Mad tiki-taka. I don't want to call it tiki-taka, but it was just like kind of one-touch, amazing passing football. The ball gets played over to Robert Pires, who just makes this incredible move down the left, squares it to Ljungberg, who's right in front of goal. Ljungberg just one tap over the bar. Ha ha ha. Super duper funny. And that's your sitter of the week. Guys, we have made it to the end of the podcast. I'm going to talk about 2 big games this weekend because there are 2 glaringly big games coming up this weekend in the Premier League and in Serie A. The rest of them are kind of like, standard fare. But we've got Spurs versus Manchester City in London. I'm going to predict a Spurs victory. Yeah. Yeah, baby. Antonio Conte knows how to pull it out. They pulled out a smash grab victory against Fulham last week, and I don't know, something just tells me that Spurs are going to beat Manchester City and do Arsenal a gigantic favour, which they almost did a couple of weeks ago. But yeah, they lost. Wait, maybe I've made a mistake. Why are they playing each other in such quick succession? Because there was a cancelled game, Spurs-Manchester City, when the Queen passed away. That's why it's happening in such quick succession. Okay, we got it. So that's this weekend. I predict Spurs victory. And then there is the Milan derby, La Derby della Madonnina, which is, of course, between Inter and Milan. Milan are in absolute free fall. Inter are doing pretty well. They knocked Atalanta out of the Coppa Italia this morning to make it to the semi-finals. I'm banking on Inter going to win this pretty fucking handily, even though who knows what's happening with their club in terms of the Skriniar situation. But having said that, Milan are in way bigger disarray right now. It's either going to... I don't see a Milan victory. It's going to be a Inter victory, and that is that. Ladies and gents, please leave me an iTunes review or like some cool comments on YouTube or whatever. But just like get involved. I'm starting to feel it again. I'm not gonna lie to you guys. I'm going on tour soon for my stand-up show. My stand-up show, Heart of Darkness, is basically totally written, which is what I've been spending the last couple of weeks focused on. And having been burnt out from the World Cup, football was just not exciting me, especially given the situation with Juve. But I'm back. And I'm feeling love for football. So thank you for sticking along with me for this journey. And if you appreciate this podcast, please let me know about it. My mate's dad, my mate had a 30th over this weekend, and my mate's dad told me that he liked the podcast. So shout out to Stan if you're listening, my man. Let me know if you like the podcast, and just like I don't know, I say it every week, but I see the numbers. I see that there are lots and lots of downloads. There are at least, between the downloads and the YouTube views, there are at least over 100 people consuming this podcast every single week. So get around me, get involved, guys. Write some reviews, write some comments. There's some people that leave YouTube comments. Thank you so much. Leave comments on the Instagram, and write an iTunes review. That would really be a good help to push this podcast in the algorithm and help me out. Okay? Love you guys. Thank you so much for being with me. Forza Brighton, my boys. Raise your daughters as always, and have a good weekend. Be cool.